I know somewhere that is truly tranquil, peaceful, restful, a panacea for the cares of mind.
Can't we go somewhere fun?
Fun? Oh, I suppose anywhere will be peaceful after Necros. All right. I'll take you to...
And that was how Series 22 finished. Perry wanted to go on holiday, and the Doctor suggested, well, nowhere. This week we'll be talking about The Trial of a Time Lord. You really do feel the urge to put some voices on. So before I talk about The Trial of a Time Lord Parts 1 to 4, let's talk about what really happened at the end of Series 22. Or more precisely, what happened halfway through Series 22. For reasons best left for internet forums, it was decided at the BBC that Doctor Who was in dire need of a revamp. It was still getting fantastic viewing figures, but certain fan groups and certain people at the BBC really didn't want Doctor Who to continue in its current form, or even with its current management. Things like JNT must go were heard throughout the land by people who still don't like the shape the series had. Colin's Doctor admittedly did take some getting used to, but this decision had really been made before we'd even had a chance to see him in action for very much. And so a decision was made somewhere by someone that Doctor Who would be rested, taken away from us, a hiatus. Yes, it's the sort of word that still strikes fear into the hearts of many an old-school Doctor Who fan. But of course the hiatus came as a surprise to the production crew just as much as anyone else. They of course had originally decided that they would start work on Series 23 by commissioning scripts from various writers and putting things in place, obviously during Series 22. Not so much story arcs as sensible planning. And so the first thing that happened, because of the hiatus announcement, was that the original Series 23 was cancelled. So what could we have had? Well, details are a little bit sketchy, and in some cases hardly exist at all. But the upshot is basically this. There were 6 stories about to be announced. When the Doctor was asked by Perry,
Can't we go somewhere fun?
Fun? Oh, I suppose anywhere will be peaceful after Necros. All right. I'll take you to...
the original reply had the word Blackpool at the very end. This was to lead straight into the first story of the new series, a story called Nightmare Fair, written by Graham Williams. It was a 2-part story, again still sticking with the 45-minute format that we'd become quite used to, and with the major villain, the recurring character of the Celestial Toymaker last seen in 1966. In this story, the Doctor would play a video game in order to save the world, and Perry would be bothered by some sort of robot miners in Space Mountain. To be honest, it doesn't sound the best story in the world, and if you want to judge for yourself, this was actually novelised as part of the Target range and can be sought on eBay, or indeed in many of the Doctor Who shops that you can find on the internet. The second story was called The Ultimate Evil. Now you have to remember, most of these stories only existed at this stage as concepts that hadn't really been through the script editing process, so they would have evolved. The Ultimate Evil, written by Wally K. Davey, was set on the holiday planet Tranqualia. Now, I'm sure that would have changed in the final version, where a character, the evil dwarf Morden, had something like a deep space ray, and he was supposed to be bringing about war on this peaceful planet nearby. It's all very dubious. It doesn't sound like the best Doctor Who story ever. The third story, now that was going to be written by Holmes, the guy who actually ended up writing the story I'll be talking about in a moment, and this was set in Singapore, Some location filming was supposed to be happening with John Nathan Turner when he was on holiday, but that didn't really come about. And so the idea remained fairly vague. It was apparently going to have the Autons in it, possibly the Master, possibly the Rani. We're just not sure. A possible title for this was banded around the internet, and people have assured me that this is the case. Yellow Fever and How to Cure It. I think that would be classed as a working title. That was never novelised. Robert Holmes sadly died soon after. The next story, this is the fourth in this whole season, was Mission to Magnus, and like the earlier stories, this is available as a Target novelisation. It was written by the same person who wrote Vengeance on Varos, and would have Syl returning. As well as Syl, he'd teamed up with the Ice Warriors, and it would be lovely to see the Ice Warriors return. And to be honest, it would be lovely to see the Ice Warriors return, even today. Of course, there was some sort of harebrained scheme to alter the Earth's gravitation in order to cool it down to make it more palatable for the Ice Warriors, but to be honest, it does sound a bit spurious. But then again, we've just sat through the Doctor towing the Earth through space like a little tugboat. So let's not judge the past, shall we? About the last two stories, very little is actually known. The first was to be written by Christopher H. Bidmead, and the last was to be called Children of January, and that was a two-parter, of which very, very little is known. Because, as work was progressing on them, everything was cancelled, the rug was pulled, and Doctor Who had to re-evolve. This evolution took the form of Trial of a Time Lord, a 14-part story, which will be coming out on DVD very, very shortly. This is, of course, Region 2. I'm not sure when the Region 1 release will be, but enough about that. Let's talk about the story itself. The concept of having the Doctor on trial comes from the production crew originally thinking, well, we're on trial, Doctor Who itself, the TV show, is on trial. Why don't we have that as an overarching theme? Now, Colin Baker is on record as saying, that's a bit risky, and in many respects it was. Presenting us with a 14-part story meant that the audience really had to invest quite a lot into it. The format, of course, was switched back to the 25 minutes as the show originally had, and was to stick with 25 minutes right up to the end of the Sylvester McCoy era. Although the story is 14 episodes long, it's actually 3 4-episode stories and a 2-episode story, as seen in the box set, which will be out very shortly. So the first story was parts 1 to 4, known to most people as The Mysterious Planet. Now, the nature of The Mysterious Planet in The Mysterious Planet will remain undiscussed at this point, on the grounds that I really don't want to spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it yet. The story opens with perhaps the best Doctor Who model shot of the classic and indeed possibly the new series. A large space station hangs in the empty blackness of space, and the camera travels along, through, around, and we witness a wonderful model. The TARDIS is sucked into a small glowing blue portal, and everyone watching went, Doctor Who's back, this is fantastic. And then a few seconds later, the TARDIS is materialised, rather than materialises itself, on an ordinary BBC set. The model shot itself must have cost an absolute fortune, because it wouldn't appear out of place in these days of computer-generated imagery. Unfortunately, such a high-standard model shot gets to be used again and again and again and again. And because it costs so much money, we can kind of let them off. But as the series progresses, it does get on your nerves slightly that, oh look, we're in the same place, doing the same thing that we were 2 months ago. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. The Doctor stumbles from the TARDIS and heads towards a darkened room. And in this darkened room, rather oddly, is a bunch of Time Lords. Somebody sitting opposite him, in not a particularly Time Lordy hat, identifies themselves as the Valiard. Now, the word Valiard means learned doctor of law, which we'll come back to later, I strongly suspect. And because of the shorthand used, we know that there's a trial about to take place. In fact, this is what we hear.
Would it be too much to ask what all this is about?
The accused will remain silent until invited to speak.
The accused? Do you mean me?
I call upon the Valiard to open the case.
By order of the High Council, this is an impartial inquiry into the behaviour of the accused person, known as the Doctor, who is charged, but he on divers occasions has been guilty of conduct unbecoming a Time Lord.
Not guilty!
He is also charged with, on divers occasions, transgressing the first law. It is my unpleasant task, Madam Inquisitor, to prove to the inquiry that the Doctor is an incorrigible meddler in the affairs of other peoples and planets.
And of course, as the audience, we were expecting the first story to be a trial, and that would be it, and then we'd get on with the rest of the series. We didn't realise that all of the parts would be dedicated to this one narrative. We'd have the Valeyard saying things like,
Inquisitor, I am not proposing to waste the time of the court by dwelling in detail on the activities of the accused.
Good.
Instead, I intend to adumbrate two typical instances from separate epistopic interfaces of the spectrum. These examples of the criminal behavior of the accused are fully recorded in the Matrix, the repository of all knowledge. I should like to begin with the Doctor's involvement in the affairs of Ravalox.
Which translated into human language basically means that he's going to show us some Doctor Who stories and he's going to interrupt. And this interruption really gets on your nerves. Apparently, to entertain, we're considering having the whole Trial of a Time Lord series released on DVD with the option of removing the trial sequences just so you could watch the story. Now obviously that doesn't quite work given the ending of Story 2 and the ending of Story 3, but we'll be discussing those in separate podcasts. This one is about the mysterious planet. And so the Doctor, by himself, is in court. We don't know where his companion is. As far as we're concerned, his current companion is Perry, although Big Finish have managed to cram in quite a few separate companions into this elusive gap. The Doctor even questions, saying,
As a matter of interest, where is Perry?
Where you left her.
Where's that?
You don't remember? Obviously a side effect of being taken out of time. The amnesia should soon pass.
And I'm sure things will return quite shortly. And so onwards to the actual plot. The Doctor and Perry have visited the planet Ravalox. This, of course, is seen on a video screen, so this is evidence, whether it's for the prosecution or for the defence. You're never quite sure, because Gallifreyan law is, frankly, preposterous. The Doctor starts his trial off as, let's have an investigation into his activities. And then the Valeyard suddenly decides, oh no, it's a murder trial, oh no, it's genocide, oh no, let's just have all of his lives. What he's actually on trial for is almost secondary to the whole narrative. It's very odd. The Doctor and Perry visit the planet Ravalox. As already stated, this is seen on a small monitor inside the courtroom. Apparently it's information gathered from the Matrix. Again, that's the Time Lord Matrix, rather than a Keanu Reeves film. Ravalox is a planet that bears more than a passing resemblance to Earth, but of course it's in the wrong place. Ravalox has experienced a fireball which apparently killed everything on the surface, but it's got a surprisingly large number of trees, which couldn't possibly have survived the fireball as described in the Time Lord's journals. So what really happened? Well, as always happens in some classic Doctor Who, the companion and the Doctor split up, and we experience two very separate worlds on Ravalox. The first, the underground world, run by apparently immortal robot Drathro. This is where the Doctor experiences a wonderful world where people only have 3 books, and that's their entire library. Perry, on the other hand, is captured along with 2 remarkably well fleshed out characters, that of Sablon Glitz and his companion Dibber. Robert Holmes' scripts often have 2 characters which fit together really well, and this is no exception to that at all. Glitz and Dibber describe themselves as sort of Arthur-Dalian space spivs, wide boys with massive guns, and of course all of these people get taken captive by the above-ground dwellers, run by Katrika the Warrior Queen, played here by Joan Sims. And now, if you're not from England, I just need to explain a little about Joan Sims. She is, or rather was, known primarily for her roles in the Carry On films. Now, everyone's aware that comedy is very difficult, and if you can pull off comedy, you can usually pull off something serious, or at least stylised enough, like Doctor Who. However, at the time, there were mentions of a phrase that's become quite popular even these days in Doctor Who fandom: stunt casting. Yes, when people like Kylie were talked about as being part of the new Doctor Who cast, and of course even Catherine Tate to a certain extent, or indeed more pertinent to this example, being that she was known as a comedy actress, people did complain. But again, just like Tate, well, not quite as well as Tate, but still perfectly acceptably, Katrika is brought to us perfectly well. A slightly ageing Amazon queen with an English countryside type feel. There are times when we really just need to step back and let people who do casting get on with casting. For example, Nicholas Parsons was in a Sylvester McCoy story, known to most people as a game show host. Anyone seeing that performance really would have nothing to complain about. Back to the story. A standard runaround adventure ensues. The Doctor trying to bring enlightenment to the underground dwellers, while the above ground people are almost but not quite tricked into helping out some sort of revolution, and the truth eventually unfolds. There are seeds left here for what would be known these days as a story arc. What exactly was Glitz and Dibber after? Apparently it's great secrets that somebody, we'll never find out who just yet, wants to keep more secret. And why was the Earth moved? And what is the nature of the planet itself? I don't want to talk about these things at this point in case you want to see the story afresh. Performance-wise, this is a great story. Colin and Nicola pull off a wonderful reinvention of their relationship. They're snide with each other, using lines very similar to the way they used to behave in the previous season, but here we are given a slightly more sarcastic meeting of equals. A true relationship. And for those of people keeping an eye out for how Sarah Jane Smith's name is used, here's Colin Baker after he's been hit on the head by a robot.
Doctor! You're alive. I knew it.
Oh, my head hurts abominably, Sarah Jane. Where are we?
I'm not Sarah Jane, I'm Perry.
Eh?
And you're lying under the remains of a robot.
Chalk one up to the Sarah Jane Brigade. And so looking back at this story, it's a strong opening to what could be a great narrative. It's filmed well using outside broadcast technology, so there isn't that jump between interior and exterior shots that you get most of the way through the Davison era. Holmes's characterization is marvellous, especially considering how ill he was at the time. This is a very good story. I would love to experience it without all of that tedious mucking about in the courtroom, but as yet the courtroom isn't quite as tedious as it becomes later on. Of course, I'll discuss that much later on. At this point in the Tin Dog podcast, I usually like to play a little bit of music, and during the hiatus period, a charity record was brought out to bring people's awareness of Doctor Who to the fore, and of course make money for a cancer charity. This was called Doctor in Distress, and here it is.
Doctor in distress. Let's all answer his SOS.
I'm so sorry, I just can't inflict Doctor in Distress on you. I'm not that cruel. It's a terrible, terrible, terrible song. I'm so sorry for everyone who was involved in its production. It just wasn't good. And so I'm not going to play it for you. If you really need to find it, I'm sure it's part of the box set somewhere. If you need to find it that badly, I'm sure you can find it. Before I go, one piece of Whostrology. From someone calling themselves Sarah Jane Smith. They were born on the 8th of June, 1964. Which means she was born during the Aztecs. So here's her reading. Sometimes clues are all around, and romance is in the air for someone you don't always think is up for it. You can always change your destiny, but if you try sometimes, you just might find you get a load of Spanish invaders. And with that, I'll leave you. Until next time, when we'll be discussing the continuing saga that is Trial of a Time Lord. Be seeing you. You have been listening to the Tin Dog Podcast. Doctor Who and its associated shows are all trademark of the BBC. No infringement is intended. Contact us at tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk.